Well, hello everyone and welcome to another video, this time covering Japan. So this is now a proper normal race weekend, short qualifying, normal 50% race. We are now allowed to use all the compounds of tyres. However, even then the hard tyre is not that great around here. The softs and the mediums are looking a bit stronger than they have at previous Grand Prix. But either way, the hard tyre is still going to be a main tyre used in the race. So this here is my first attempt at a flying lap around Japan in the qualifying session. As you might have noticed, there have already been a couple of mistakes made, going a bit too tight on some of the corners and going wide in others. However, the time actually ended up not being too bad compared to everyone else. When I first set the lap time, it did end up being the quickest overall. However, very quickly, Big T and Mango managed to beat it quite soundly. So they were in the mid 1 minute 26s. I was still struggling to get below 1 minute 27. However, I did have it in me, but only just. In practice, I had been able to do a 1 minute 26.8, but that was on an absolutely perfect lap. I didn't think I'd be able to reach that in this qualifying session. However, I was still hoping for a 1 minute 26.9 or a 1 minute 27 flat. And initially, this second flying lap looked like it was going to do just that. It was looking very strong in the first sector and even in the middle sector, but unfortunately the lap time sort of just went away in the final chicane, which is one of the trickiest corners on this track, surprisingly. And I found in practice that that was the set of corners that I was always struggling with in qualifying. Now thankfully I did get a little bit of a tow here from Diva Croc. And now we're going to come up to that final chicane. I just braked a little bit too early, didn't carry as much speed as I could have over the first curve, which put me offline for the second apex, and then on top of that I got a little bit of wheel spin on the exit, again because I wasn't carrying quite enough speed through those corners. But anyway, that put me in 4th place as a brilliant lap from Winters put him up into P3. So I immediately set my sights to trying to jump Winters off the line, try and get in front of him, and then use him to hold up everyone else behind. Now in terms of the strategy, the F1 game didn't allow me to choose a one-stop when it was very easily possible at this track, but it did look a little bit different. I really liked the mediums at this track, so I was planning on going as long as possible on them to at least lap 12, then pitch from them onto the hard tyres. But it is now time for the race to start. So we managed to jump Winters and everything seemed to be going to plan, but Mango was teleporting all over the place due to his internet connection, and that nearly resulted in a crash, as I thought his going wide was just merely lag, and I did not react in time and very easily could have ended up rear-ending him, which would have taken off my front wing end plate. But thankfully, that was avoided. Now on lap 4, I actually managed to get close enough to Mango to have a look at P2 into the sprint curve, but I backed out of that. Mango, however, launched it right into the sprint curve, got very close to Big T, and the dirty air gave him a slightly worse exit. Mango also seems to have decided to recharge his battery, so this is letting me gain on him up through 130L, and now I'm going to try and put him under pressure here into the chicane. See if he makes any major mistakes, also just to give him the hurry up. Otherwise, I am more than happy to settle behind for P3, at least for now. Now by lap 6 I realized it was going to be very difficult for me to try and go for any moves on Mango or Big T here, so I decided to try and focus on looking after my tyres and take them as long as possible. Unfortunately though, Skilly had other ideas and decided to spice up the race with a bit of a safety car. What this means is everyone has to pit from the mediums onto another tyre, simply because there's not much advantage to staying out at this point. Now this is where Big T makes a big mistake. He gets himself a 10-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, and this is going to change the complexion of this fight for the top 3 steps on the podium. Now, I had lost a couple positions to some other cars that stayed out under the safety car, so on the safety car restart, I'm hoping to be able to make up as many positions as possible on those drivers that have stayed out on older tyres. So at this point, Boogeyman out at the front has released the field, and here I was a little bit late with my reaction, and that does mean I'm a little bit further away from Mango and Butcher than I would like to be. But either way, I know they're going side by side, so Butcher's probably going to be going a bit wide here in turn 1, so I immediately pounce on that opportunity. At the same time, Boogeyman and Davids have gone wide themselves, and that allows me to make up one more position over Davids, put me straight behind Boogeyman, so I can immediately set myself to trying to overtake him, and that will put me right behind Mango once again. Now here I unfortunately get another track limits penalty, which now puts me on 2 warnings. So 1 more warning and I get a 3-second penalty. That is going to factor in quite a big way slightly later on. So at this point, because I'm on the mediums and the 2 in front on the hards, I'm planning on pitting earlier than they are, and I basically told myself at this stage of the race, as soon as I start losing pace, immediately box for hards, try and maximize the undercut as much as possible, and try and put the 2 in front under some pressure. That didn't quite go to plan. At this point in the first sector, I can tell I'm starting to lose some pace, but it's still not too bad. I'm still staying within a second of Mango. But as we go into Degno 1, I'm going to get caught up by the dirty air, and in trying to avoid getting myself a penalty, I end up getting beached on the curb, which then sends me over into the Moser decorated barriers. And that takes off the left side of my front wing, and at this point I absolutely have to box, and I've lost a lot of time. What was a 7.5 second gap to Gems behind is now a 2.7 gap. So the thing is, this crash was caused a lot by that willingness to avoid getting a 3-second penalty. Because in the F1 game, if you go just a millimeter outside the white line, even if you brake as hard as you can and you lose a full second in doing that, because you go over by just a millimeter, the game can't tell whether or not you lost time in going off the track, so it just gives you an immediate warning. In this case, it would have been a penalty. So I open up the steering wheel a bit more than I would have otherwise, to try and give myself more time over the white line so that the game can see that I've actually lost time doing so, thus avoiding the 3-second penalty. The problem with that curb is if you go too wide, you just get beached on it and there's almost nothing you can do to get yourself off it. Now thankfully I didn't DNF. That was my major concern when I saw myself going towards the barriers. I was very thankful and grateful that I was still in the race after this. Yes, I'm now compromised, but at least I can still fight for a podium position. Now unfortunately that front wing change does mean I've now come out behind Davids, who had pitted 4 laps earlier. So now at this point I'm quite close to Davids, but Biggie Man in front has spun around and that is going to slow up Davids, and I'm going to be trying to challenge him into Degno 1, but then I back out and I'm now going to be going for a move up into the hairpin. So I'm burning my battery. I've committed this time to the inside, braking late, managing to get to the inside, and managed to get that move done quite nice and neatly. And now I can set my sights on the next couple of cars in front. Now at this point Big T has pitted and he's copped himself another 10-second penalty. So at this point I'm set to finish in front of him as long as the gaps remain the same. So at this stage I'm now going to be trying to overtake Venom Puzzle, but at the same time Gems is leaving the pits just in front, so he has managed to jump me with the overcut and with that front wing change I had to make. And he's on the mediums, which I think were slightly better than the hards. even though the hards could last longer, the hards just never quite gave the same amount of grip or confidence. So I'm going to be trying to take any opportunity that presents itself to get in front of James and try and get track position, and this was one of them. As Rickus is holding up James and I go to the inside, I have burned my battery, but I want to commit to this, and even though I lock my brakes under braking, James is still able to brake later than me and go around the outside. Now Rickus is in the pits. James has got DRS and far more ERS than what I have. So at this point, a move is just not on. And James is going to start putting away quite rapidly, even in the first sector, which was one of my stronger sectors. And now on this lap, James is going to make a move on the real fig into the hairpin, and that is going to hold up the real fig just enough to give me a run on him down towards Spoon Curve. And on lap 22, a safety car is going to be called out, which is going to bring a temporary halt to this race. Now this is where things start to go a little bit south. Because I'm on old hard tyres, it's taking absolutely forever to get them into their working temperature window. And even though I was weaving as much as I could before the safety car restart, I just could not get any temperature into them. However, one thing went my way, and that is I was able to get a better start than Gems, but the rear tyres were not there. So I nearly spun out of the final corner. Now thankfully I was still far enough ahead of Winters so that I was not under any pressure, but it does mean I lost any opportunity to get in front of Gems. Not that it matters much, because I wasn't catching up anyway. These tyres in the first sector were just not giving me any front end grip at all, and the rear felt loose on corner exit. And at this point I realized that I wasn't going to be on the offensive, I was going to be on the defensive. But thankfully I was able to hold on to third place until the final lap. Now I just need to maximize my exits out of this corner and out of the Dunlop hairpin and spoon curve, and I should be able to come home in P3. It was close. Winters put up a very good fight, but thankfully I managed to hold on just enough to stay on the podium. So, as always, these are the results, and that is the highlights of my race on Thursday last week at Japan. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.